Let's bring in Democratic Senator Brian Schatz of Hawaii. Good to have you on board with us this morning. Your reaction to the settlement by Dominion?
Well, I think the lawyer was right. We learned a lot from those documents that were published, and it confirmed everything that we already knew in writing, which is that Fox was lying, their on-air personalities were lying, and it was a matter of great consequence. It was a matter of the fate of the republic. And so I am disappointed that we didn't get an on-air apology, although I'm not sure what difference that could have made. $778 million is a big deal, but not big enough to, I think, cause Fox to change its ways.
Well, I want to get Claire McCaskill's reaction to the settlement and also take what you just said to her, because, Claire, I think there were many people who believe that Fox has a lot of viewers. They're number one in a lot of time slots, and a lot of people only watch Fox. So an apology might have made a big difference.
Well, here's the thing. I think many of us in America wanted this lawsuit to be our surrogate for accountability and finally having Fox admit and say they were sorry. And by gosh, we had everybody lie to hold on to office, to hold on to our audience for money. But there were lawyers representing a client here. And while they battled long and hard and got all these documents in public, at the end of the day, what they were offered is essentially, in real money terms, what they needed from the jury if they'd gone to trial. So I get that the client wanted to settle and the lawyers had to respect the client. And I would say to my friend Brian, and I think he could certainly confirm this, even though it won't be on Fox News, it is everywhere in America today. It is in the newspapers in Hawaii. It is in the newspapers all across this country. It is on every major network except Fox. So everyone gets, if you pay $800 million, you did something wrong. And so I do think there is some vindication that we all should be comforted by.
Senator?
Yeah, I think that's right. I just do think that Democrats, progressives, people who are frustrated by the lying need to know that this is a structural problem, that there is no moment in time, whether it's a lawsuit or some pricking of the conscience of an individual news personality, they're not going to stop. They cannot be vanquished in that way. We have to communicate with the rest of America who is not locked into Fox News with the truth. And so I just want us to be careful not to think that the federal court system is going to save us here. This was a positive result, but it doesn't really vanquish Fox News. They are going to continue to do what they do.
So speaking of a structural problem,
they're going to continue to be sued, too.
Yeah, they are. Let's talk, Senator, speaking of structural problems about the debt ceiling. Wait, again, I don't know if Republicans don't understand this or if their constituents don't understand this, but when you're paying a debt ceiling, that's like paying a credit card bill. It's for debt that's already been incurred. This is not for programs that are going to be paid for over the next couple of years. This is to pay for all of the debt, the record levels of debt that Donald Trump accrued over his 4 years and the debt that's been accrued over the past year or so. How do you negotiate with a party that doesn't want to pay their credit card bills when they're the ones that incurred the largest debt in the history of mankind?
Yeah, this is like going to a steakhouse and ordering everything, and then when the bill comes saying, you know, I can't pay, I'm trying to save a little money here. It was too late for all of that. Look, the consequences of default are way, way worse than I think people are fully understanding. We would see a crash in the dollar. We would see a crash in the stock market. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security would be endangered. The United States has to pay its bills, and that cannot be negotiable. When we had leverage, the Democrats had leverage, and Donald Trump was president, we passed the extension of the debt ceiling, no fuss, no muss. And that's really important because there is a context in which we should be negotiating over revenues and expenses, the size and scope of the federal government, but it's not in the context of does the United States default on its obligations. We cannot default, and we cannot negotiate about whether or not we're going to entertain default.
And by the way, if you're driving in your car right now or listening to us, on the radio, we just showed a graphic that showed the debt ceiling has been increased 49 times under Republican presidents. 49 times since 1960, only 29 times under Democratic presidents. The only time Republicans care about this is when they're not in office, raising the debt by record levels.
Yeah, and Kevin McCarthy, of course, voted to do so repeatedly during Donald Trump's administration. So, Senator, speaking of the House Speaker, he unveiled a little bit of the Republican budget in the last couple of days, their ideas. He's also got a lot of work to do trying to herd very disparate viewpoints in his own conference. And one of them is the idea that the Inflation Reduction Act, which, of course, Democrats like yourself passed just in the last year or so, should go away. Could you talk to us about your response to that and what that would mean if that were to actually, in the theoretical, were that to happen?
Yeah, a couple of points. First of all, they actually still don't have a plan. It was the repeal of portions of the Inflation Reduction Act. Yesterday, I think the day before, they wanted to cut the $6 a day that most recipients of SNAP benefits, food stamp benefits would get as a deficit reduction measure. They don't even have an idea of what they want to accomplish. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, like I said, no policy concessions at all in exchange for the United States paying its bills. But if they want to have a negotiation, look, it's a Republican House, it's a Democratic Senate, it's Democratic president. We're going to have to move forward on budgets and appropriations, and we're going to have a tough negotiation. And we understand that the government is divided. The one bright red line that we have is, look, we are not negotiating over the basic question of the full faith and credit of the United States. So it'll be interesting to see what the House comes up with in terms of their budget plan. It'll be interesting to see whether Kevin McCarthy can muster the votes to be successful. But even if he is, we're not entertaining that as a condition for the United States paying its bills.
Senator Brian Schatz of Hawaii, thank you very much for being on this morning.